Anxiety is fear of the future, and the horses live in the now and the present. Same with the goats. The biggest thing we teach is how can you have relaxed alertness instead of anxiety? So
Mm.
if these prey animals can get out of stress that quickly, why can't we?
Welcome back to Seeking Center, where we dive deep into the spiritual and holistic practices that help us navigate our journey toward healing, transformation, and self-discovery. Today, we're exploring a truly unique and powerful modality, equine partnered coaching and healing, with our extraordinary guest, Kate Neligan. Kate's path is fascinating. She left behind a high-powered corporate career in entertainment to fully step into her gifts as an equine partnered life coach, healer, and animal communicator. With a master's degree in spiritual psychology and a certification in equine experiential education, she combines the wisdom of horses, her intuitive abilities, and cutting edge coaching tools to help people experience deep growth, transformation, and healing. We're going to get into how horses can reflect our emotions, why they can help us shift old patterns faster than traditional coaching, and what it truly means to embrace your inner power with the support of these majestic animals. And we're also going to talk about how partnering with goats is very new to the life coaching and therapy space. And yes, we said goats. You may have seen goat yoga or even goat hikes, but goats are so much more powerful than just their physical strength. Whether you're an animal lover or simply curious about how to deepen your connection to yourself and the world around you, this episode is for you. There is so much to discuss. Let's dive in. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. Karen and I have talked about equine healing, and we didn't even know about goats. But first, let's talk about you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started this journey?
Yeah, it found me in many ways. I rode my whole life. I've loved animals and horses my whole life. And I had one of those very pivotal, the world stands still moments when I was at the ranch one day and I was leasing a horse that I was riding from my friend, and we were best friends. And all of a sudden, my horses were just in this really unique program in equine assisted therapy with those coming in from treatment centers and rehab and addiction treatment. And she started to describe what the horses were doing with them on the ground, and my mouth dropped open and I'm like, what is that? I need to know more about that. So I immediately volunteered and signed up to work with my mentor and just sat in these sessions and was blown away by the change I saw in 2 hours. That at the time I had already gone through my master's in spiritual psychology, but I saw that change take sometimes months to years. And then this change was happening in a matter of hours. And I was totally blown away by what the horses were doing because I had never seen them through that lens. I had always rode, and it was very much a different type of dynamic.
Okay, what even led you to getting your master's in spiritual psychology?
So I was at one of the movie studios and I had another one of those kind of moments where I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I'm selling horror movies and I wanted something more meaningful. And I felt like I was just on this track to keep honoring my ego because that's what was around me. And this whole like, we need more and I need to climb the corporate ladder and just all of this like very masculine drive energy that was not authentic or congruent to who I am. And so I went and got my master's in spiritual psychology, even though I had previously been an atheist and I was not interested in this space, but I knew so much was awakening inside of me and I needed a place to study it more. And I grew up in a house with a mom who was metaphysical, and she would have her friends over. They were all oming, and I used to call it like the witches downstairs. And I was brought to past life conferences when I was 12 to see Raymond Moody, and it was around me, but I was always like, that's my mom's thing. And so I think for me, though, finding Louise Hay when I was going through a bad breakup in my early 20s, it opened me up to the mind, body, spirit. And then I had so many psychic intuitive gifts since I was a kid. So it was a natural thing to look at the spiritual psychology degree. And it took me right out of the atheism fully into what they call loyalty to your soul, is the name of their book, Ron and Mary Holnick. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be in this space where I'm more of service. I'm loyal to my soul. And it's not this pursuit of the insatiable ego anymore.
That's huge. To comment to that. How old were you at that point, or what year
Early,
was that?
Still early 20s. I found my path with Hay House in my early 20s. And then I started to get my master's when I think I was 27. So I was still young. And then it was really in my 30s where I dove deep into all the modalities you talk about in Seeking Center and tried probably over 100 different modalities of healing and the process of the seeker, right? I was thinking about it earlier, and it's that I miss being home on some level, and I miss having the awareness and the understanding of all that's available here outside of 3D. And so that's what Seeking Center, there's this opportunity to really expand not just our knowledge, but then the embodiment of the knowledge. So that's what it was for me. I think luckily I found this way. And then as soon as I graduated from my master's in spiritual psychology, the horses came into my life, like right after, as this is your new path now. And so I started taking riding lessons and knowing it wasn't that anymore for me in that space of competition. And I grew up riding, but I was in so much perfectionism with it because I was always being yelled at. And there's a lot of control in that space and power over. And so watching these horses work and how beautiful they were with putting their heads up to people's hearts, I was like, there's so much more to horses than I knew. So then I dove into studying that.
And my other question is, when you were in that program, getting your master's in spiritual psychology, is equine healing part of that?
No, so the way that happened was really funny. I was actually working on my conscious media channel, which you know about. And at the time, I was a little bit frustrated that the world wasn't ready for it back in 2010, 2011 in that space. And one of my friends was like, do you ever just want to try something else? And I'm like, yes. And then out of nowhere, intuitively, she goes, I just see you coaching with horses. And I'm like, what is that? I'm going to be shouting life advice while we're horseback riding because I had no concept of it at the time. And then lo and behold, shortly thereafter, my friend who I was leasing her horse, she told me about this experience and I said, I need to see that. And I was on a path earlier in my 20s where I could have gone the addiction route if I didn't find spirituality and really have my own awakening. So working with those who were in rehab, really dealing with addiction and just all of the layers that are underneath that, of course, it was just so beautiful to see how unconditional love has really helped them become more present, become more centered, have hope again, and develop in real time strategies and ways of dealing with life, healthy self-soothing, that kind of thing from horses. And I'm like, this is such a beautiful pairing of my gifts because when I left my master's, I did start life coaching, but I started without the horses. So then the horses came in and were like, this is what you're doing now. You are devoted to us and we're going to do this together. And so I had to put the conscious media channel aside and really just went straight into this world of learning from animals.
And we're going to dive into that. And I would love to know, while you were in the seeking, which once you're a seeker, you're always a seeker, which you and I have talked about. Were there certain intuitive abilities that you were already tapping into even before the horses were introduced?
Yeah, I think when I was young, the gifts, I had a lot of clairaudience because I was hearing voices and my parents didn't know what that was when I was in fourth grade. They thought maybe I was stressed and I was just clairaudient. And I don't remember all of what that was, but I also remember seeing ghosts or feeling things and I would shut stuff off because I was really myself a little bit freaked out. And then there wasn't a lot of support for it either or understanding of it. And now my mom knows I was an empath and highly sensitive and now she gets it. But back then, there wasn't a lot of support out, I think, even for parents to know what to do with kids that had. Now we're talking about neurodivergence. We've come a long way, right?
You
So,
really have. So, what was your spiritual awakening that really played a role in you saying, okay, this is what I'm doing?
yeah, I think it was just knowing that corporate America wasn't working for me. I left first for the conscious media channel. I didn't leave for the horses. But then when the conscious media channel felt like it wasn't working for me at the time and it wasn't ready for the world or the world wasn't ready for it, I decided to go full in on the horses. And a lot of it was because I was seeing change happen so quickly. And one of the first groups I worked with was a movie studio, and they had such profound insight and transformation and connection through doing these exercises with horses on the ground. And I'm like, this is actually how I create change in the entertainment industry, in media, is actually bringing them outside of what they're used to and getting them open and letting them have their awakening. Because then I have this realization, okay, they can greenlight scripts then that are about compassion. They can really change the narrative if their own inner narrative changes, right? And their way of viewing the world changes. And then as I moved on, what became even more and more important is that we honor the animals and that it's really about being a voice for them. So hence me moving into animal communication as well. But it became more about, I love movies and stories and media. And I feel like for me right now, my job is to tell the story of animals and their healing. And so it became even more specific, but more aligned to who I am too.
That is really beautiful. Just even hearing you tell that story. Can we now talk about how are horses intuitive healers? How does that work? And when you started to work with them in that way, having ridden horses in the past, do you now see at certain times where you were connected with the horse in a different way?
I think I've constantly been now a student of the horse. And so I'm learning, they're evolving, right? They're sentient beings evolving here on Earth in their own process of awakening and enlightenment as we are. And so I'm constantly learning more and more about them. And I feel like every time I do something with them and humans, like I'm in that human animal bond, there's so much power in that. There's such a uniqueness in that synergy of when they come together that so much can change for both of them, really, and for myself as well. So I live in so much awe and wonder when I see a horse contribute to a human in such a unique way that they don't know this human and they're still giving and there's still so much trust and there's still this space of acceptance and all of these really deep qualities that it's just so beautiful to watch. And they do really wild, magical things. We always say you can't make this up. So it's almost like this choose your own adventure game that we enter into. And then we watch what actually happens when horses are illuminating things for people. And it's just so cool to watch all the light bulb moments and how they work because it's so intentional. And people are like, have they been trained? I'm like, no, this is who they are. This is how they show up in the world. So.
Okay, you have to give us examples. I need to hear more about how they do show up in that way and what you're seeing and what you're feeling and how even in your own life.
They've done so much for me personally. They've really made me much more heart-centered, right? And that's because you can look at the horse in different capacities. You can look at them from the physical space, which is they have huge guts. They've got 4 feet on the ground. They're grounded. They're prey animals. The fact that they even hang out with a bunch of predators is next level if you think about it, because prey animals are like bunnies and deer. And then you have their hearts, which are their electromagnetic field is 5 times the size of ours, and their physical hearts are much larger. So you're getting this blast of heart intelligence, which they're living in nature. Unlike our dogs or our cats, which live in our houses and are exposed to technology and everything else, horses are living in nature. So they're very much a part of nature. They're as close to the wild as you can get with them being domestic. And so they live inside those rhythms. And you can meditate with them and feel immediately connection between heaven and earth. You can ride between the worlds. You can have intuition come online because they're very intuitive. Or they have these advanced frequencies, I believe, because of their heart space and because of being on the planet for as long as they have, where if I set up on a massage table and a horse works on you and works on different parts where there's pain or stuck energy and they're transmuting it or infusing with higher frequency. So there's all these different ways. And then there's the traditional equine assisted learning space, which is about education and coaching. And it's the whole premise of how you do one thing is how you do anything. So if you go in and you immediately want to take something from a horse, or you're grabbing at a horse, which we saw with those in addiction treatment, they needed to grab a horse or touch a horse, or they would put themselves in risky situations. And we would call it out. We would say, do you feel safe right now? How does the horse feel safe? We would actually ask them in real time to read whether their choices are working for them or not. So you get immediate feedback on how what you're doing is either helping or not. And if it's serving, if it's for the highest good of all, like we get to actually see how we are working, whether even just going to say hello to a horse. And then the stories that come up. Oh, the horse didn't say hi to me, so the horse doesn't like me. That kind of immediate thing
Yes.
that you're getting because you're doing experiential activities.
I honestly never really thought about that. That's very interesting. So, how does a typical session work with a horse?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have typical anymore,
Yeah,
but what I
that's
do
probably true.
is what is someone's intention? And usually it comes from a place of what do you want to receive or what do you want to release? Because I really think the horses are doing both. They're having us release stuff that's no longer serving us. So usually things like fear, anxiety, limiting beliefs, anything like that. And then things that are no longer working. Let's say if we were to do, someone had an intention for a leadership session. We would practice leading a horse with a halter and a lead line, so attack, but also trying it at liberty without either of those and seeing what is your body doing? Are you pushing? Are you rushing? How are you communicating with the horse? Are you a safe space? Are you emotionally regulated? How's your nervous system? So we look at kind of all these different things. So then you can take that and go, this is actually how I'm leading, which there's so much to that. I don't think we can always talk about leadership. We actually have to practice it with our bodies because that's what people are reading when they're looking at leaders often is they're reading body language more than anything. So it's really real-time feedback in that sense of how that might work. And that's just one example. But a lot of people, for me, come for stress relief and really mindfulness and deeper spiritual growth because that's the level that I go to. There's a lot of traditional things where you can do different exercises with horses. And a lot of my work looks very simple and very quiet, but it's really profound because they can feel things from the horses. And I will often ask people, what do you think the horse is saying to you? And their intuition's right there, and they get messages from the horse and the goat right away. And that's really powerful for people too, because they're like, wow, I am more intuitive than I thought I was,
That's
which
really
I think
cool. Yes.
we all need to learn that. We all need to practice.
Yeah, because everybody has the capability to turn their intuition on and really pay attention. We're all intuitive. It's just a matter of how much you are actually allowing for yourself to be aware of
Exactly.
how intuitive you are. When working with the horse, one question I have is how is their eyesight and how much does that play into the therapy?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting. I think of that again from both a physical and a spiritual. I've always walked these two worlds because I've worked in vet medicine and I wanted to be a veterinarian and I love the physical and the science and I love the spiritual and the mystical and mystery. Their eyesight is good. They can't see all colors, but they can see directly in front of their face and directly behind, which is why we're always taught don't run up behind a horse. It's just they can't see you there. Don't surprise them, so to speak, because they do go into flight as prey animals. But what is interesting is there's what I see on the spiritual side of what a lot of people do is their eyes are so large. And when do you have an eye that's large? That's usually at eye level, unless you're working with a mini horse. You're at eye level with this huge eye that really looks right into your soul. And so I had a veteran once and he just immediately got emotional and he walked away and I was like, what's coming up for you? And that horse sees my pain. Like
Wow.
it immediately started to bubble up. And so there's something about looking into their eyes that puts us into this heart space. It allows all this emotional stuff we've been hiding or pushing down to just naturally surface. We're really seen. And we're seen through the eyes of love. We're seen with acceptance. There's no judgment, but there's real truth. And so I think one of my mares, if I'm ever in this insecure space or doubt space, she just stares right at me until I'm like, okay, I get it. I get the power that you're showing me through just staring at me. And they will do a lot where they'll come right up and put their eye right up to you and ask you, can you get present?
Yeah, when you were just explaining how this works and what you can get out of it, honestly, the image that kept coming to me was staring into the eyes of a horse that I've done before and never really thought, to your point, they really see me. That is actually what it is.
Yes.
And the other question that came up for me as you were describing how this works or can work is if someone is coming and they are very fearful in life and they're coming with the intention to potentially overcome fear, right? Because it's acting as a block for them. How does that work with the horse? How do you get them to trust? Because I'm thinking they're very fearful people. And then you have people when you were talking about from a leadership perspective, you may have people who are almost overly confident. How does that work?
Yeah, I love it because we can look at on the leadership side, assertive versus aggressive versus passive. We can have that conversation very easily because the horse will let you know. They're constantly responding to your energy. They're very intelligent in that space. When fear is one of my favorite things to help people with, and I've done it with little kids that come in and are like, I can't go anywhere near the horse, to people who used to be horse people and have had a traumatic incident when they were younger with horses and then do come to finding acceptance and confidence around the horse again in a session, even in front of a corporate group. I've seen that happen. So I love helping people. And most people have what I call healthy fear of horses because of their size and because of their power. And so they approach usually with some level of either trepidation, intimidation, or even just a respectful, is this okay to do with the horse? Which I think is great because immediately there's a humbling that happens.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking as I'm picturing this.
Yeah, there's a humbling that happens. And I've been around horses my whole life and I've worked with so many in so many different places in addition to my own that for me, it just really helps me be present. Because if I walk out and I see a horse acting out because my energy came into the field, I'm like, bye. And I go back in, I leave and I reset and I recenter. And then I come back out from a different place. And it has happened because we're rushing around from thing to thing. And so it's really that opportunity to be like, okay, wait, this whole thing from my master's was outer reality is a reflection of inner reality. So you start to see horses getting really chaotic, what's going on inside or what's going on in your life that is chaotic that you need solutions for, right? We've seen that before too. With fear, it's good to have some natural, healthy fear of an animal that size. And if we're very fearful, we start across the fence. We start just watching them. And we basically do not push ourselves through threshold with fear, whether we're training horses or we're working with humans, because it's watch across the fence. What do you notice about this horse? And a lot of if I skip to the result or the understanding that people get, it's, oh, just because this animal has power doesn't mean it's going to misuse its power.
Interesting. Wow.
Right? And we can pair gentleness and strength.
Yes.
We can be both relaxed and powerful. We can have this energy of being really big and strong and also just super kind and intentional because that's the horse, male or female, young or old, as long as they're not dealing with trauma and they have issues with people. They are very much in that space of when a little kid walks up, they're very kind and they know where their feet are. And because I believe they have this ethos of respect, honor, do no harm. It's nonviolent communication, especially with humans. And they know there's this opportunity for learning in the human animal bond. But what we do with then is once someone's comfortable going in, we'll take the next step of, okay, just approach them and see how you feel. But it's a great way to work with the nervous system in steps through breathing, through getting back into that space of even putting our hand on our heart and doing some heart math breathing and feeling our feet coming into all of our senses, like really working with the somatics of what does it take to get to more relaxation and how do we face the fear too. And so my favorite story with fear was I had someone from a corporate group who had actually just started a week or two before and had an incident with a horse. And we were doing an exercise called leadership on the box, where you have to ask a horse to move into an area without any tack and stand there. And she was like, I don't know if I can go. I don't think I can do it. And so eventually what happened was after the second person went, she said, I have to do this now or I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, great, thanks for being brave and volunteering, and stood up and was really shaking, like really was dealing with that old trauma that was coming back. And I was like, would you like support? Yes. And so then immediately learned to ask for support. And I guided her through it. And I'm like, just take it slow, be really intentional, and be with your tears, be with the fear that's coming up, be with healing that old memory. And then she was the only one all day out of 20 or 30 people that actually got the horse inside the box.
Wow, I have the chills.
Yeah, because she was congruent and she was real and authentic
Yeah.
and honoring of herself and slowed it down enough. And then what was the coolest part for me was she sat down and everyone in the group was like, "We love you. You're amazing. Thank you so
Oh,
much." Because they gave, it was that sense of by being shining her light and being authentic, gave everyone else permission to be the same way. It's like we get so shut down at work. We can't cry. We can't be
yes.
ourselves. And then these groups come out and they do this work and they realize there's so much beauty in the humanness that we share. So yeah, let's be human at work.
And what you're providing, both with your energy and your being, along with the horses, is this space. They've dedicated time to be, which again, in a corporate environment, usually you're not given that. You go in and you're from the minute you get in to the minute you leave that day, feels like every minute has to be clocked in some way. So that humanness is so important. I have another question too, related, which is for the person that came in that was maybe overly assertive. I often wonder if there is a fear factor that ends up coming in at all. And I would also ask, as a human, once we can see how powerful this being is, even though they're powerful and they're big, yet they are quiet and reserved. Do you see those kinds of awakenings happen with people who are powerful and loud?
I see the power thing happen the most with women because we have been in a power over environment for a long time. And when they really understand right use of power and power within and how they generate from inside out these emotional intelligence qualities that they want to share with the world and they're themselves, then they notice how everything works better. And so they have a different relationship with power and they witness the horses being in their power. And it's that Marianne Williamson quote about shining your light. We're not in this place where we're always afraid of the darkness. We're sometimes afraid of that light and that power. So for them, I feel like it gives them permission. And I had a cool story with my mare once where she wouldn't let this group of people touch her, and she normally does. And she was pinning her ears and air biting, and she never does that. And I'm like, "Are you okay? Are you not feeling well?" I got nervous for her, and they need to listen. And I'm like, "Okay." So I was like, "Why don't we come across the fence? And instead of everyone trying to touch the horse and glom on, let's just stand and breathe with her. Let's look in her eyes and let's just see what comes up for you guys." And then she relaxed. And then you could see the tears start to bubble up of people are like, "I don't need to grab for this thing that I want. I don't need the beauty is not outside of me. The power is not outside of me. It's within." And it was just so beautiful because they would sat down in a circle and shared, "That's the lesson I needed." So that's what I mean by the horses will do things that you've never seen them do before. And we always say you can't make this stuff up because in that exact moment, somehow need do the thing that's most needed so that the client gets exactly what they need
Wow.
as the lesson.
And you as the facilitator and communicator to
The
understand.
bridge. I help
Bridge, to
bridges.
bridge it. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's
I help
really,
people walk on that bridge and I'm like, "Hey, what was that for you?" Because if you just left people alone with horses, they'd be like, "Oh, they're so beautiful." And they'd feel better because of what's going on in the frequency. But to actually then be like, "Okay, how does that apply to your life? Or what does that bring you?"
it's just having this conversation is reminding me of the last time that I was with a horse, which was really just observing. And it was about maybe a year ago. And my family showed up. There was no one else around. The horses were just outside. And so we were just looking in their eyes. And I had this real stare down. I think I have a picture somewhere of the horse, and it was so special and it was so quiet. And we were just staring. And so what you're bringing up makes so much sense. And I didn't even think about it that way. And so I bring that up because I hope everybody listening may have a memory like that and you can't explain it and it's quiet and you didn't have you there as the bridge, which is the whole therapeutic part of this. But just even that knowing that many of us have had that experience. And what if you then took it to another level to really dig into what is that horse helping bring up for you? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And sometimes I like to process it and sometimes I like to just let people sit with it too because
Can
they're
be like I can actually remember where I was and what I was doing and what it was bringing up for me, which I haven't thought about.
It's cool, right? Yeah.
Super cool. Okay, there's so much more. What about goats then in this same idea that we're talking about from this therapeutic standpoint?
It's totally different because you actually have to get down to the ground to be with them. So instead of standing up and being more in your power and more in your physical body and being so present because you are navigating 1,200 pounds, you actually do the opposite. And so the horses will say, go to the goats first because they're heart openers and they get us back into that inner child place. And the goats, their eyes are like these slits where they see 360. And my goats are really unique in that sense that I think that a lot of goats still have horns or still have all these. They're very in that livestock category, which I don't love for them. But mine, people are like, wow, they're so calm and they're so loving. And I've had 5D experiences with my goats, but there's this level where they've had a lot of purity because I've been with them since birth. And what happens there is they get people into their inner child. They get people into their heart. They get them into that space of awe and wonder, which is a lot of like my work and the core value is how do we find awe and wonder in the moments? How does that then come into our body and raise our frequency? But also, how do we then look at life that way? Even when it gets hard, where's the awe that day? Where's the wonder that day? How do we go to that space with them? So people, they blown away by that. But recently I had someone here he was sitting on the ground and he had his hand down and my goat just curled up and put her entire face right on his hand. And so I was like, what is this for you? What does this remind you of her look like? Which is one of my questions. And it was like, yeah, it's connection, it's intimacy. And then lo and behold, what unfolds in the session, really great, juicy stuff around intimacy and relationship. And so that's how this works in that sense of even the littlest thing that a goat chooses to do in that moment or a horse chooses to do because they know it's that clear cognizance knowing this is what's needed. We're going to show up and expose this. And then we have an opening. Whereas we don't necessarily have that in the therapy space if we're just talking, right? In an office because it's two humans and you have the souls there, but you also have the egos and you have the mind as the predominant processor. Whereas when you're with the animals, you have the body. So you have the entire system and you have your gut and you have your heart. And so everything's working together to really create the learning and then the change. And that's what people say too. They leave and they're just able to sleep better and they feel lighter. And then they have these, they think about it. Like you said, I'll never forget that memory of this horse. There's something so powerful to the spiritual energy of it. I liken it to if we were back with the yogic masters, right? If we sit the feet of people who have done so much inner work that just being with them elevates our awareness. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have so many questions because what I want to talk about also is how you use your animal communication in your work. With that communication, what have you learned about why these horses have come into this world at their souls as a horse and souls as a goat, why they've chosen to do that in this lifetime, and then how you then use animal communication in general with your work?
Yeah, thanks. For the goats, I think they're really here to teach core emotional intelligence skills from the perspective of curiosity, bravery, family connection, community, that realm, which is about love and the playfulness, that curiosity and the playfulness and the bravery, which we need more of when we start to have doubt or we look at starting new projects. We need the curiosity. And so they bring that out in people. And they help people really understand and learn these qualities. And people love when the goats follow them around. They love the connection. My goats stay really present with them. So people are scratching them and connecting. And there's all of, again, that kinesthetic feel to what happens. And there's research by the Human Animal Bond Research Institute about what happens when we pet dogs with our heart rate and our cortisol and everything. So it's similar to the goats because they're that size and they love to be scratched. You could scratch them for hours. And with the horses, it is about that blending energy, I believe, for everyone about how we are powerful and gentle, and also how we step into the authenticity of who we are based on how horses see us, but they're not asking us, they're really asking us for congruency because when we're congruent, we're trustworthy and we're safe space for them. And so they will point out any little pieces where that doesn't exist. And if you think about it, the more congruent we are, the more we can be successful, the better we are in relationships. We're seen. It's just a match versus any type of masks, which we're all taught to wear as humans. So they're really in that place of dismantling it. And then how I utilize the animal communication is A, for me, B, for the people I teach, which I train people to do this work in equine partner coaching and utilize animal communication. But I also really like it as the C offering is for the clients to ask the horses or the goats for messages. What do you think he's saying? What do you think she's saying? And let them play with their own intuition. Let them grow that actual whatever clairaudience or feeling or sensing that they get to in that moment. And then usually I can validate it because I hear the horse say the same thing. And they're always accurate. It's so beautiful to watch people who don't think they have any intuition and come wanting to work on that too. And it's, whoa, look at this. This is all.
Wow.
And then the horses will confirm it. So they'll lick and chew, which is a sign of contentment, yes, or understanding. They'll do this little lick and chew. Sometimes my horses will head bob, like a yes, you got it. I've also trained them if I need a yes to touch my hand. So they will like actively seek out my hand and touch it. So there's a lot of ways too that we can get that confirmation from them. And they'll walk away when something's not a fit. Or they'll do something even more obvious, walk up to you and have a release. So, like they'll pee or poop right in front of you, and you're like, okay, what's that? There's so many really very interesting things that they choose to do. And they just know. And they know even more than I do being intuitive. They just are able to read things. So they've told me stuff about people's past sometimes that helps me as a coach. They'll tell me what someone needs. They'll come up and say, she just needs to believe in herself. And then we go right there. So I hear them from that perspective of, I'm here to, how are we better partners so that we can help this client?
That is so cool. And it's interesting when you brought up the goat too. And in my own experience, I was going to say, you said something like they follow you around. Isn't it interesting if you're in a situation where you are with a herd of goats, there usually is one that seeks you out and you do feel this kinship with, even if it's for a short time. But no one has ever said anything before, at least to me, in this before this conversation, that's actually on purpose. I never thought of it as a spiritual experience. It's blowing my mind a bit.
I love that you just said that because that's exactly right. So when you go to those conferences and you sit next to someone that you definitely needed to meet, and
Yes.
it's very much like that. And I have three horses and they will definitely each go to the person that needs them the most and then needs that quality. But it is 100% the same with my goats where all four of them are very different. They're related a bit, but what happens is the leader goat will always go to the human that is either working on leadership, needs to embrace more of it, needs to talk about it. And so I will ask people who they're drawn to, or I'll watch the goats choose who they want to work with. And then we go to her archetype is this. And so it's just really neat. And I see it even with myself when I go out and I sit with them. The day when I'm grieving, I got Grandma Gigi there. Like my mama goat, she's the one that's there and she'll cuddle with me and she's so great with the grief. And if it's a day where my energy needs balancing and harmonizing because I might be too stressed, I got my leader goat Nettle and she's just, and you can't even approach her until you check your energy because she needs that level of respect and consciousness around our energy when we approach her. So there's so many things that they can help us do in such a short amount of time too.
Okay, there's two things. One is you mentioned the word congruency. For some people, they may not have heard that word in respect to what we're talking about. Can you just define that?
Yeah, for me, it's that my inside and outsides match in that also what I'm feeling, I'm willing to be with. So, for instance, the woman who got the horse in that activity to partner with her and accomplish the goal, she was saying out loud, because I said to her, I go, just say out loud how you feel. And she kept going, I'm really afraid right now. And I'm like, great, thank you for sharing that. And so it's that level of you can't walk up to a horse and be like, I'm fine, everything's fine, and be really upset.
Right.
And you've got all these anger things going on. And then all of a sudden, you'll see the horses start fighting. And you're like, what is actually happening? And they're like, have you been angry in the last day or two? And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, I'm pissed at my partner. So it's like that. So it's like really getting us to a space where how we feel and what we're saying and what we're doing is aligned. I was very incongruent when I was selling horror movies and getting my master's in spiritual psychology. That's an example of incongruence.
Yes. I love that. Thank you for explaining that. And then I love how you are explaining this as therapy, which is what you do. How long does somebody need to work with you or another coach or equine therapist in order to really see some results?
Yeah, great question. So the therapy side is in some ways structured the way it would be inside an office where people are often coming weekly or in a cadence and they're working on mental health. So the therapists are trained in some ways looks like taking the office to the barn or to the ranch and setting up chairs either next to horses or being in with horses. But it feels very similar to talk therapy with additional horse support for me, that because I've seen it, I've been a client of that before and I've watched that. The coaching side is could look similar, but it also can look like doing a lot more exercises. And then the space that I feel like I exist in the most is really more of this equine partner spiritual growth and healing, which is honestly really about how is your energy intelligence? How's your emotional intelligence? How's your self-love? And so you can see breakthroughs in a session. And ideally, I would love to work with people more than that. I don't always get to. And if I'm working with a team, I meet them where they're at. We're not
Right.
necessarily going into all these deep spiritual conversations that I might with private clients, but meet them in that place of what qualities do you need more of? Because I actually created this deck, the equines deck, and this is the leadership card. So there's different exercises in here. And the one right on top for us today is the joy card.
Oh,
So there's different exercises that we can do. And so I actually say, okay, if someone comes and they want to work on communication from the booklet, what I look at is, okay, what's an exercise here that we can do together? And then how are we, I actually channeled what the horses had to say about it. And then I wrote my part from being a coach. And so that's what it's about. It's about emotional intelligence and how do we grow these from the inside out? Because then if we're working on communication skills, then our relationships get better. If we're really stepping into that, it's not just let me fix my relationship. And we're talking about he said, she said forever. We're really actually working on, okay, what part of your voice, your throat chakra needs to get cleared. So my work is just very different even than coaching and therapy, but it has elements of all of it, if that makes sense.
it does. I have a question. How do you work with people who have major anxiety? Is that something that you are able to help with?
Totally. I think that's what actually helped me. If I was to look back at the horses, what I worked with the most with them myself was anxiety. Back in the day when I was leaving my corporate job, that's what I was in therapy for, was that and dealing with the power over patriarchal stuff that we've seen in corporate America. And so it was really about nervous system regulation, emotional regulation. So we breathe a lot with the horses. We
Mm.
sit on the ground and ground. We might meditate. We go back to the basics of the mindfulness tools. And then how do we pattern interrupt if our mind starts to go into a difficult space? What do we do for self-soothing? If we have anxiety is fear of the future, and the horses live in the now and the present. And so what I like to do, same with the goats, is, hey, so that goat just got upset about something. How's it dealing with it? Oh, that horse just got upset about something. How's it dealing with it? Within seconds, they're back to grazing. So the biggest thing we teach is how can you have relaxed alertness instead of anxiety? So you're
Hmm.
relaxed and you feel good. If these prey animals can get out of stress that quickly, why can't we?
Yes. I imagine that then that stays with you so that next time you're in one of those situations, you can feel back into what was happening when you were with them.
Well said. And that's what the kiddos do. I always say to the kiddos, what do you notice about this horse? They're so calm. Great. How can you have that calm? And then we talk about being like that horse. And I've seen people put the horse on their phone to remind them. It's that anchor. Oh, yeah, that horse goes calm. I can be calm. I had one of my kiddo clients help me once when I was afraid of something, and I started to use his ideas and strategies around getting back to calm. So that's the beautiful thing about all of this. And the horses, too, we're all in this synergy of helping each other grow and learn because some horses do have more anxiety than others. One of my mares does. She's more fearful. But when she's around humans that are really regulated and I can chill more too. So we're all helping each other.
Yeah. And you've talked about how growth and transformation are not an event, it is a process. How can we cultivate more patience and self-trust from what you've learned and gathered from working with the different animals? What would you say?
I love those because they're actually in the card deck. I'm like, what did I say actually when I did one on the card deck? Yeah, the trust piece is huge. That's my life path. And I would definitely like ask me in a couple of years. But no, it's one of those things where when we start to realize that it starts from within. I asked a horse once, this is where animal communication gets really helpful. I asked a horse, how do you trust us? How do you prey animals trust us predator animals? Because in the world, people still eat horses and horses are unfortunately slaughtered and the wild ones and whatnot. I could go on, but it's like they go, you offer it first. You're aware and how you feel around this being. Do I feel good? Do I feel safe? So that's the thing. I watch how my goats especially are with people. And if they curl right up with people, I know I've got good people there. I know I've got trustworthy people there, people that are going to be kind to the animals. And I think that's what's important is that people who have trust issues or self-doubt, they come and they see the animals trust them, and it's really moving.
Oh, it makes me want to cry, actually, just even you talking about it.
It's a game changer, right?
Yes, I never thought about that. Oh, I
That's the
love this card for everyone who's listening.
that's the trust card.
Oh,
Do this exercise too, where a human actually lays on the backside of a horse. The area we're taught is the danger zone. We go into breathe and regulate and ground because my mare loves doing this work and she's safe to do it.
wow, that is a beautiful card. For those who couldn't see it, it is this woman. She's standing up and she's leaning backwards against the back of the horse with so much trust.
And it's really about being grounded. It's what seeking center, when you in your center, you're grounded. And when you're grounded, which the animals are, I ask people, can you feel in your 2 feet as strong as you would if you were a horse or a goat and they're four?
Mm.
You're connected to the earth, you're connected to your own wisdom. And
Right.
that is how you can discern better and trust better. And you work on your intuition, really going up into this third eye space and opening that, then you can ask and get, is this for my highest good or not? Is it lighter or heavier? And we can get answers quickly. If I was to distill what's helped me the most from horses, it would be getting grounded and being more intuitive. And then that's what I want to give to everyone, right? Because the medicine we get from something is usually what we most want to share. And
Oh,
that's the patience one, which is a little girl being kind to herself as she paints a horse with, of course, non-toxic washable paint. So, yeah, it's about slowing down. And I think we get to all learn the value of what slowing down can really provide over time, which the animals have. So.
yes, that's true. And with the card that you just showed, which patience, and there is this little child painting in the color, I think was probably very purposeful and that it's purple.
Yes, these are all based on the chakras. So the trust card was red because it was the root chakra for grounding, and this patience card is this kind of upper level connection to crown of in divine timing, my friend. It will unfold.
We all need a dose of that. I needed that reminder. Okay, another concept that you talk about is the fact that so many of us are pushed by pain versus pulled by pleasure. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how we can shift our mindset?
Yeah, and I think the first time I heard that was probably at Agape with Michael Beckwith, which of course I was going to Agape after I was at my movie studio day and needing to balance out those energies. I think what it really is the animals in particular are always following what feels good. They are listening to their gut. Does their belly feel full? If they're tired, they nap. If they're thirsty, they drink. If there's the basic needs of food, forage, friends, freedom. And we get to this point in life where if we haven't been doing our basic needs, or we're incongruent. And we talk a lot about the soul. You and I have talked about this too, where you feel like your soul is dying if you're not doing the thing you're here to do or the thing you most want to do. And so it's that level of that's being pushed by pain. And it can move us into the direction where we want to be, into the spaces we want to go to. But I like how the animals are teaching us this hold by pleasure because it's really how they live their lives. They live their lives. They're seeking to feel good, not from this hedonistic space, but because they know that's what keeps them healthy. And what keeps them healthy keeps them living and thriving here on earth longer. And that's, of course, what I want for them. I want them to stay here. But ultimately, they show us that we just need to get back to natural rhythms so that we are in the cycles of what nature is already doing and how she thrives.
I keep going back to something you said in the conversation today, which is that the horses and the goats, they don't live in the home with all our devices and all of these technological advances and distractions in many ways. Some of them are wonderful. And the fact that I can be looking at you right now, having this conversation in two different states and all of that is awesome. And there's something to be said when we're talking about getting back to those natural states. They're such teachers by just being.
I think of them as those really the role models. They hold the map, they hold the key for us to understand what a really fulfilled life on earth can look like. And it is often basics. And so we just need to remember that. And often simple shifts can really create then, it's obviously Maslow's hierarchy, but starting with the simple shifts of what an animal would do to feel better and solving those pieces first. And then we go to, okay, what's next from there? I would love for us all as humanity to learn more through success, to learn more through joy, through play, than necessarily through this hardship or the struggle. In some ways, the polarity of Earth, but there's also this opportunity. What if we shifted the script and we all believed that we could learn more through pleasure and joy? I actually have a pleasure card and it's that mutual benefit. How can we get into that space?
Yes, I really think, Kate, that's what you and I, along with so many others that we love and trust, are trying to do. Really do need to find that shift. That I believe is part of why we're here and why you're here with these animals, and also the ability to understand them and then translate for us is such a gift. And actually, I think a need for us.
I hope so. I think there's a decent amount of speciesism, but I also believe that it's sometimes much easier for us to learn from an animal than from another human based on our history or herstory. And it goes deeper sometimes because it's so novel that the novelty of it alone activates the senses. So then it stays deep with us. Whereas we talk all the time to other humans, but what happens when, as you said, it was quiet when you were really learning from that horse? The stillness alone, there's so much
Oh,
power and transformation in that.
yeah. And there are certain animals that come into your life that are there for a reason. I have a dog that came into my life recently. She is, I think, going to be one of my greatest teachers. I can't get over her patience with me and just her unconditional love. I haven't felt that in so long. And there's something so healing about that. And there's wisdom that I can't even put into words. And I'll sometimes look at her just like I was thinking about when I look into the eyes of the horse. And I'm like, thank you. Just thank you for being, and thank you for just being here.
What you're bringing up is beautiful, and it's so at the core of all of this, which is the dogs, the horses, the cats, they do see us. It is that quote, see yourself the way your dog sees you, but
Yes.
it's that unconditional love, that
Yes. Oh,
support. There's something about us as humans being held in that space of being witnessed through eyes of love, through acceptance, non-judgment, stillness, nonverbal. that is a game changer. It's so deep. It's so beautiful. It makes us feel loved.
And that you're enough. It's all the things. And no matter what, I'm enough. I'm enough for her, for my dog Lucy. But yes, that's what they show us.
And you're worthy of it. You're worthy
Yes.
of that level of presence, of support, of compassion and witnessing. And it's just because I've seen that happen so many times where it's so still because we're not doing a ton of exercises and people are like, just really emotional. And I'm like, what's coming up for
Yes.
you? I don't think I ever was seen like this by my parents or by anyone, or I haven't had it in a while, and people are blown away that these strange animals that all of a sudden are just giving to them. And it is unconditional giving because they're literally living from source. They're being source for us.
Yes, I really can't get over that as much of a seeker as I am, that I never really thought about it this way. And even that horse that I was telling you, it was about a year ago that I can still remember. And the fact was that I also didn't want to leave. Just like when I've done certain between lives regressions and I didn't want to leave that, it's similar in that sense of there's so much love and peace that it's hard to describe. It was like almost time stopped.
Yes, I think of it as the energy of bliss. I think it's where we're going. I think it's 5D and above. It's just so pure and peaceful and loving and joyful and yummy. And it is hard to leave that. But what's cool is when the animals do it, it's also grounded. So it's not like some modalities where you do travel out and you're out. You're still very present and in your body, but it is like being back in the void in the like the womb of creation. It's just really, it's amazing.
Well, and you're trained in emotion code and heart math and energy work. And how do those modalities complement what you're doing both with the horses and the goats?
I think so many modalities support this work. And what's neat is, for instance, I have a sound bath practitioner come in, and when you do sound with horses, it's just great for the horses. It's great for all of us. And it's just amplifying the energy and purifying the space even more. Emotion code, I do for both animals and humans. But what it is, we get stuck emotions all the time. And so it's really so much of my work is emotional based that you see it. So I couldn't just see it and be like, oh, well, yeah, I get that you're dealing with shock or panic, but let's just talk about it. No, I'm like, are you open to me helping move the energy of that? And so I do emotion code right outside with people when it comes up, when I see it, when I feel it. And I'm like, are you open to a healing? And everyone's always, yeah. So it's just then I step into myself as healer and the horses are supporting as them being healers and they're doing their own energy work and they know what to clear and heal as well. I love the table work that's becoming really popular now through some videos that have gone viral of letting people be in that quiet, surrendered space and having the animals work on them. And I bring in a lot of just my intuitive channeling and guidance from the horses. In some ways, I'm actually the assistant to the horses versus the other way around, which is what a lot of people see in the EAL and EAP species. It's the horses are helping the humans. I look at it as I'm helping the horses to just share their gifts in some ways.
Will you explain what heart math is for people? Because it did come up in this conversation and we have not covered that.
Yeah, so HeartMath Institute is a really great place that's essentially studying the science, and there's research to the heart as a brain and the heart as a system that can essentially help us in a lot of different ways with the nervous system and emotional regulation. So I have not the full training, but I have experience with some of their modalities with heart breathing. And honestly, that's what the horses want us to do. They'll come up really intentionally, stick their nose in your face, and just be like, and you're like, okay, time to do breath work. And I like to do the heart-centered breathing as the modality because the more we're in our hearts with the horses, the better it all works with them. And so it's just practice. And so I think what's so great is you get something that's a scientific piece to support what we don't have a ton of science on, which is the horse and what they're doing for emotions. And you bring it together and they're just really nice marriages. Yes, heart-centered breathing, different heart math modalities that essentially just creates coherence. And in that space, again, it's like being grounded. It creates more success in anything that you're doing, truly.
I agree. We've actually, Karen and I have both experienced heart math and we've never covered it on Seeking Center. So it is, I'm so glad you're able to at least give an introduction to what it is, because I do think it's something that we want to dive a little bit deeper because it is really powerful.
Yes. And there are people who dedicate their whole life to just doing that. And I just like to bring in different modalities that I know work and partner when needed, especially like you said before, anxiety. What's one of the best ways to get out of anxiety is through the breath. So we'll do the heart-centered breathing in that case too. Yeah.
I love how you're bringing all of this together. Just want to live next door to you.
You would have a blast with the animals.
Yeah, well, that is going to happen. What are some of your daily spiritual or mindset practices that keep you grounded and aligned? I would have to assume some of that is going to sit with your animals.
That's pretty much the number one. And some days the only one. And I don't really need much else. When I worked really hard to get myself to a place where I could live with my animals, which is where I'm at now in Paso Robles, California. And it took a decent amount to find a place where I could actually be. And so for me now, it's talking to trees and wild animals and sitting on the ground. And I think sitting in dirt, if there's a movie called Dirt, it is literally one of the healthiest things I think you can do. And a lot of people don't want to, but just being with your senses and sitting on the ground and being in dirt, I swear it's kept me healthy for a very long time.
So if people want to work with you, I would assume they have to be in person, or can they be virtual?
Yeah, so the fun thing I've done virtually is I do animal communication work virtually for sure. And because I just need photos, I love doing it in person also. But I like to do these things called horse wisdom readings or other coaching sessions where I bring my animals onto Zoom for people, which is really fun. We could do one at some point for Seeking Center. They basically come onto Zoom on the background. And I started to bring my laptop in 2020 to the ranch and actually put them on with me when things were changing and we couldn't gather in person. And so they will come and transmit energy right through the screen. We actually taught Heart Math and Horses classes during that time because we could put them on screen and people could feel their presence, their eyes, their hearts. And they knew it took them like a minute to be like, what is this? And then they could hear people. So I would be like, this is Robin. And this is what Robin is curious about, wants to know about. And so I would do intuitive readings for people with the animals communicating, and then also doing some coaching for people too. And sometimes I would surrogate. So I'd be like, okay, we're working on this. What would you do if you were here? So it's really works much better than I ever thought it would have because of energy. And I, of course, love working with people in person too. And I do travel for that also.
That's so good to know. And I'm definitely going to take you up on the virtual, whether it's for me, but I actually think for Seeking Center, I think that would be a really cool experience for people. And I also hope to come see you in person, but I also encourage others. And I love that you travel as well. One other question. In terms of the animal communication, are you communicating with animals that are alive or that have passed?
Both. I do pretty much everything except for lost animals. And my favorite is like really weird behavioral slash medical things because I set a really strong intention to have medical intuitive abilities. So I will feel in my body what's going on with the animals. So yeah, I do a lot of that and also emotion code inside of those readings when I do it. But yes, animals that are alive or past.
That's helpful. I mean, my mind is blown today. And I know there's even more that we didn't cover, but I feel like there's so many people, including myself, including people in my family, that can really benefit from this kind of work, both from doing one or two sessions to an ongoing therapeutic basis.
Yes, thank you. And I do love the immersives too, now that I can do that with the property where people can come and stay and be in a retreat like setting for themselves and explore because I love to work with spirit guides and the spirit animal wisdom. And there's a lot of that available when you're in nature-based places too, where you can have experiences just walking the land and having a lot come forward that way too. And I like to bring people to labyrinths and all the other things. I like to curate experiences when people come out here also.
Do you offer retreats at certain times of the year?
Yeah, so I have the private ones come up, and I think I'm really here because a lot of my community is in Los Angeles, so I'm so close, but people can come from anywhere. And I'm going to do these Introduction to Awakening with Equines 2-day immersives where people can really experience the different modalities, because that program is about spiritual psychology, animal communication, and success psychology, really like the marketing, because that's my background. So it's really bringing the three things I feel like I can really support people with the most into an offering over a couple days where you get to be and learn.
Thank you for all that you're doing and for following this path. I love what you said about awe and wonder and
Yeah.
following that and bringing that into all of our lives. So I'm in awe of all that you've done, and you've really inspired me in so many ways today. And I'm sure you have for so many that are listening or watching. So thank you. I'm really so grateful to now know you and be connected and to seek with you and learn from you and the horses and the goats.
Thank you so much, Robin. I love your youthfulness, playfulness, and just huge desire to get to know these different places and spaces that can support people, because these are the advancements that we need right now. And so thank you for shining a light on them, and especially for featuring the animals today. I appreciate that a lot too.
My honor and pleasure. And for those who are listening or watching, if you're feeling drawn to explore equine partnered coaching or working with goats, you can connect with Kate at kateneligan.com. That's KateNeligan.com. Thank you.